Hello and welcome back to this week's riveting art video. Today we'll be discussing a more serious personal topic. I think I'll call this like a sketch and chat video or something along those lines. I hope to do more of these. However, before we jump in and get too involved into the story, I would like to remind you guys that all of the photo reference I used for these sketches are in the description, and as well are links for my Instagram, TikTok, my website, and my Facebook page. And I really appreciate any time you guys take to go check out my various social media pages. So, a few months ago, I sat down and began storyboarding a Draw My Life video. I thought it would be cool since I'm an artist and I've lived in a unique kind of ish life. I mean, whatever. But the more I worked on it, the more things I began to omit from my timeline of my life, I guess is one way to put it. I always considered myself an open book when people asked me about myself. But for some reason, putting it on YouTube kind of made me uncomfortable. Many of the talking points that I touched on included family members and trauma that it didn't feel appropriate to put online and to share. However, without these stories included, my life could have easily seemed easy. And I didn't want to give my following, no matter how small it is, the wrong idea that life is an easy one-way ticket to happiness, but instead it's something that forms and molds us into who we've become. I felt like I had experienced so many things that a lot of people could relate to, and I wanted to share them with you. And so until I'm ready to talk about my full life with you guys, I'm going to talk about one piece of the puzzle that is me. And if you can't tell, this is scripted and I typed it all out because I didn't want to miss any points. And so, yeah, I would say I've always had an anxiety. The depression was something that kind of came later. I've always been a control freak. Lists, itineraries, and calendars have always been some of my favorite things in the world. I check my work schedule 3 times before leaving to work in case I have the wrong location, date, time, whatever. I check the due dates on assignments over and over again because what if I wrote it wrong in my agenda, you know? For example, I have a vivid memory from 2nd grade of me crying in my mom's car as she dropped me off from school. It was pajama day and I was so worried that I would walk into school and be the only student in my pajamas and that I had somehow mixed up the dates. It wasn't until I could visually confirm that it was pajama day that I was calm enough to go about my day. And that's the thing. Once I'm there and the plan's in motion, I'm a pretty sociable person. I would like it to say that I'm easy enough to joke with and generally good at letting go of things that go wrong in my plan. It's the build-up and prep work. It's getting there that gets to me. And I guess the point of me bringing this up is that I would like you to understand that being outgoing and funny, or as I'm often described, quirky or weird, doesn't always equal happy, which of course is a cliche and we always hear that. And as a side note, I have anxiety about having anxiety, and I'm sure there's people listening to this, watching this, that agree with me on this. Like, I'm so concerned that my kind of anxiety is the wrong kind of anxiety, or that my anxiety isn't real and I'm somehow just wanting to be trendy or something. I don't know. So now let's kind of dive into the depression bit of this, you know. For me, it kind of accumulated after a series of traumatic family dramas, we've all got them, and school and social pressures, and constantly changing schools and moving. I moved so much. I counted, and I've lived in like 24 houses, and I'm only 22 years old. So do the math. That's a lot of moving. And then there's also, I had this pressure to be something for everyone, that I wasn't really being me all the time. And then there's loneliness, and loneliness is so powerful. Which, you take all that into account, and it brings me to my first ever bout of depression, I guess we could call it. And I was in 6th grade and at a new school. I didn't know how to open the turny locks on the lockers, and that made me late to my classes, and I get anxiety from being late to things and not being on time to things. And then the boy whose locker was next to me was making fun of me because I couldn't open it. And then I had no friends, and I didn't have the energy to find new ones because I had just started finding friends at my last school where I'd only been for a year. And right when I found a good permanent friend, we left, and I had to start over from the beginning again. And I couldn't really rely on my family at this time for good times and laughs, and I only have brothers. They couldn't really relate to me for, when I started my period, and they couldn't really relate to me when I was made fun of by a boy for not having started shaving my legs yet. And long story short, I wasn't doing too hot, okay? I was depressed. And it's easy to laugh about, I guess, in hindsight, but I'd like to stress that the thing that got me out of my rut time and time again were my friends. Despite constant moving, I always somehow ended up with some pretty amazing friends. Like I mentioned, I'm a rather sociable person once I get there and I'm committed and everything. It's just that build up in my mind, the voices in my head that just churn and churn all of these negative things. And so I was able to find amazing friends with very welcoming families. There was almost never a weekend from middle school forward that I did not spend at a friend's house. And being able to see these quote-unquote normal families with quote-unquote normal issues gave me hope for my future. I realized I wasn't destined to have a horrible marriage or a house full of anger. If any one of my old friends are watching, shout out to you and your families. Thank you so much. I have so many surrogate families. It's crazy. But anyway, I've gotten a little sidetracked. I already mentioned briefly my first bout of depression, and now I kind of want to dive into my worst bout of depression. And that was going into my sophomore year of college. And so I had a good group of friends. I was no longer in close proximity to my family, and I thoroughly enjoyed my degree program. So what could have caused this? When looking back, I realized I had been numb to a lot of feeling throughout my last year of high school and my first year of college. I had kind of built up this defense mechanism, where I didn't let people get too close to me. I still allowed myself to date. I made friends when I got to college, and I participated in activities. I'm a very good at doing things when I'm depressed. And so a lot of people don't know when I'm going through it. But I never fully gave myself up to these people and to these things in my life. But once sophomore year rolled around, I kind of got a little bit more comfortable, and I chipped at those walls just a little bit, and boy oh boy did a tsunami of anxiety and emotions fly out of me. I was dealing with negative self-image, jealousy, the fear of screwing up my life, my past relationship and family trauma, and so much more. And these all took form in bad habits and bad fits of anxiety that I just couldn't get myself to go to certain classes, because when I did go, I would end up in the bathroom crying the whole time anyway. I convinced myself that my roommate / best friend hated me because I thought I was just so inconvenient to live with, and I didn't want to make coffee in the morning because her bedroom shared a wall with the kitchen, and it would annoy her so much if I turned on the water, or if I used a pan she wanted to use. And so I just wouldn't go downstairs, and I couldn't make phone calls no matter how important of a phone call it was. And of course, the telltale sign of depression being that my bed was my favorite place to be. And I truly thought I was feeling all of these things for no reason, but as I mentioned earlier, I realized it was just a accumulation of pent-up crap that I've been holding on to for who knows how long, and it was all just coming out at once. And so after a full year of this, I finally mustered up the courage to make a phone call to the counseling center on campus. And when they told me that I would have to come in person to make that initial appointment, I hung up the phone and I cried for probably an hour because of how long it took me to even get to the point of calling them, and it was kind of for nothing anyway. It then took me another week to eventually walk myself into those doors. I think I literally walked up to the counseling center one day, walked up to it, and then turned around and left, and so I had to try a second time. Like, yikes, no thanks. And I distinctly remember sitting in that waiting room for the first time and seeing the other students sitting there in their chairs. I felt like damaged goods wrapped in a skin outfit, and I wondered if they could tell I had been, I had this faulty hardware inside of me, and I wondered if they felt the same, and I wondered if they thought I was being dramatic and I was unworthy of help. And eventually my name was called, and I went into the office with a small couch and a box of tissues, and the woman across from me asked her first question. She asked, "So what brings you to the counseling center?" And my response came in the form of tears. I said nothing, but I just cried. And when I think about that moment, I can so quickly fall back into the headspace of that girl, so desperate to feel worthy of anything that she's ever gotten, and so desperate to move on from the things she had no control over. And I don't want to bore you with details, but therapy was good for me, and I could make a whole video about my therapy experience and what coping mechanisms I learned. My one big advice for anyone is that therapy, you get what you out of it, what you put into it. So if you're not 100% honest, and you don't tell your whole story, and you don't blindly trust your therapist, then they cannot help you. And here I am 3 years later, and am I magically healed and mentally impenetrable adult living her best life? Not quite. If anything, I was thinking about going to therapy again, which has inspired this topic of conversation, and I just wanted to talk about this in hopes of it helping someone out there. And I know I skimmed over a lot of specific details, but if there's any areas you'd like to hear me talk about more in depth, please leave a comment in the comment section. I'd love to talk more about my therapy experience or dealing with negative self-image and thoughts. I'd also love to talk to you about the correlation between depression and art and how my art has been impacted by it throughout the years. So, without further ado, thank you so much for watching. This video was a little hard to make, and I know it might have sounded a little scripted, but that was just the only way I knew how to get all the words out properly. So thank you so much for watching, and tune in next week for another riveting art video.